Hi folks, welcome to the channel. If you like this video and you'd like to see more, please click the like button and click the subscribe button with all notifications enabled so you don't miss any future uploads. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy this story. This is an original story written by myself. It is called The School of Unknowing. Enjoy. The oceans and the seas know not of age. They are not aware of laughter lines we experience through joy, or of greying hairs as we get older. They only know of existence. Why, then, must it be necessary to give a date to a story in which age is irrelevant? Let it be known that at some point in the past, an orphanage existed on the east coast of northern England. The high walls surrounding the garden gave the residents of the orphanage some privacy, while the beach at the back leading to the North Sea gave them some entertainment in the warm summer months. Alice Carpenter was taken in by the orphanage as a baby. Following the death of her mother and her father a few months prior, and her extended family had long since gone, there was nobody left for Alice to go to. Alice was a mere 10 years old when she experienced something that no child should ever experience. The villagers had gathered around the orphanage. They weren't there to pay a visit to the poor children, however, or even to donate to the orphanage. They were there to witness the towering inferno that was once the orphanage. People had seen the orange glow in the sky and rushed to discover what the commotion was. Most of the residents of the orphanage escaped through the front door, but Alice, she was at the back of the panic. Mr. Entwistle, the orphanage's caretaker, he'd become friends with the loner Alice in her time there. He tried to get back inside to rescue poor Alice, but it was too hot. The flames were spreading too quickly. It was impossible to get back in. Alice was left in the burning building alone. She looked around for a possible new exit. She knew the orphanage well and would often explore the building, while many other children would play along with one another outside. It didn't take long for Alice to remember that there was a back door which led to the garden, and she ran for that door as fast as she could. Alice was in the garden, and she fell to her knees out of breath. She coughed and coughed from the smoke and let out an almighty scream in the hope that someone would hear her cries. The flames, though, they were too much. Nobody could hear her. As the flames grew and the heat became more intense, Alice retreated to the back of the garden, which led to the beach. She saw the old boat that the other children often played with, and she heaved the boat with all her might and managed to get it away onto the water and then jumped into the boat. In the boat, Alice started to drift out into the North Sea, and she looked back at the only place she'd ever known, burning to the ground. After some time, the rocking motion of the boat on the North Sea began to soothe Alice a little. She wasn't one to worry about much anyway, and she was confident that a search and rescue operation would be underway. Someone would come and find her in no time. Because of the rocking motion, Alice drifted off to sleep. Alice woke up the next morning, black from the smoke and still coughing a little. The boat had drifted far away from the land, and now she was stuck in the middle of the sea. She remained calm, however. She was certain that help would be on its way. The boat drifted further, and eventually it arrived at a grassy island. Alice got out of the boat and pulled it onto land. She was happy to finally not be on the sea, but with no way of communicating with the outside world, she was stuck here until help arrived. Alice climbed up to the highest point of the island to see if there was anybody coming. but the sea was empty. Alice remembered how the nice man Mr. Entwistle from the orphanage had taught her to build a den with sticks and branches. She built a makeshift shelter as she knew the night was coming. Luckily for Alice, as she wandered further around the island with the hope that maybe somebody lived on the island, of course nobody did, she found fruitful bushes though, which would provide her some food. She also found a stream which ran from one of the hills, and it had fresh water to drink. Mr. Entwistle had also taught Alice how to go fishing with nothing but a sharp stick. She did this in the sea and was quite successful, and he also taught her how to make a fire from just dry wood in order to cook the fish. Days turned into weeks, and still there was no sign of any help. Alice went to the top of the island every day. She would just look out over the sea, but it was nothing, just water. Alice gazed into the seas, and as the weeks turned into months, she was still surviving, and she began to develop the ability to read what the seas were telling her. A small ripple for a small event, and a large wave for a large event. This went on daily for some time, and it cannot be known just how long Alice had been stranded on the island. More time passed, and the seasons changed. Spring, and the island blossomed. Summer, and the island glistened. Autumn, and the island turned to gold. Winter, and the island froze. Winter came and went, and although cold, Alice had managed to survive. At the orphanage, the children were never taught about age or growing old. Alice knew of neither. And as winters came and went, Alice lost count, but not knowing of age, Alice remained the same 10-year-old girl. Alice continued every day to listen to the seas and what they told her. It brought about a deep sadness in her. Alice wondered why she must go back to that place. She was managing just fine here, but listening to the bad news, it tortured her. With the news that the waves were bringing, and Alice believing in her luck, she couldn't take listening to the waves anymore. The little girl of 10 years old finally decided to pluck up the courage to go back. She made oars from sticks and pushed the boat slowly out to sea. She rowed with all her might, being sure to stay in one direction. She followed the sun, and the sun set, and then she followed the moon. She started to become exhausted from all the rowing, but little Alice knew she could not give up. After some time, Alice spotted something on the horizon in the night sky. A light! There must be land, she thought to herself. Alice gazed again into the seas to look at what the waves were telling her. She wondered for a second why she must return, but she longed for the company of her friends and Mr. Entwistle. The light that Alice had seen gave her another burst of energy. She rowed with everything that she had, all of her energy. She grew more and more tired as the night wore on, but she still had the strength to continue. Alice was more determined than ever. After some time and a lot of effort, Alice reached the light, and it was indeed land. She jumped out of the boat as soon as it was safe. She darted towards the house and cried for help. In the middle of the night, a woman came out of the house and looked at this poor little lost girl. The woman took Alice into the house and listened to the story, but to her it was just a story. Alice mentioned the orphanage burning down, and the woman dropped her tea on the floor in shock. "It cannot be," the woman said. This poor little girl sitting in the woman's living room must have heard the story of Alice Carpenter, who had died all those years ago. She's obviously making it up, the woman thought. But she knew one man who remembered the night of the fire. He only lived 2 houses away. The woman did not hesitate. She took Alice straight by the hand out of the house and to another house. It was the middle of the night, but that didn't stop this woman. She knocked and shouted, "Mr. Entwistle, come here at once." Alice smiled, and the smile turned to a tear of joy. This house was her old friend Mr. Entwistle's, and she'd be reunited with him at long last. However, when the door opened, an old man peeked through. He took one look at Alice and scrambled to put his glasses on. "I'll be damned," he said. "How? Where? Why?" Mr. Entwistle was lost for words. To Alice, though, this wasn't Mr. Entwistle. Mr. Entwistle was a young man, not this old man with a walking stick. Mr. Entwistle then said something which changed Alice's thoughts. "Learn to read the waves, did you?" Upon hearing this, Alice ran to Mr. Entwistle and gave him the tightest hug her little arms were capable of. "Easy now," he said. "I'm not as strong as I used to be." The lady who had taken Alice to Mr. Entwistle's house left completely confused. Mr. Entwistle and Alice were talking. He still couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. This little girl was indeed Alice. She was even wearing the same clothes. She was as real as the air he breathed. But after all these years of never forgetting that fateful night, Alice hadn't grown or aged, while he'd aged tremendously. Alice was grateful to Mr. Entwistle for allowing her to bathe and change clothes from Mr. Entwistle's own granddaughter. The very next morning, Alice and Mr. Entwistle went to the beach hand in hand. Alice looked out to the sea. She listened and listened carefully. But now the sea had nothing to say. Mr. Entwistle took Alice in as his own daughter. He'd been lonely since his wife passed away many years prior. He'd never forgotten Alice's birthday, and when it came to the date, Alice and Mr. Entwistle celebrated Alice becoming a year older. Birthdays came and went, and Alice grew older. She was an adult by the time Mr. Entwistle passed away. Neither of them ever got the answers they craved, but they lived happily, not knowing what the seas said, and about the world around them, they ignored every piece of news.